Hey guys, what's up? I hope you're having a good day so far, and I'm happy to be back doing another video talking about the Mastermind GT by RGN Music Technology. And in this video, we're going to go over how to decide on how you want to run your workflow with this device. As you know, our minds as humans go in so many places. Well, the same thing goes with the Mastermind GT as well. It has so much possibility and capability to run with so many different devices. And depending on what you're working with, that opens up the door for so many different ideas of workflows, or in other words, how exactly you're going to lay everything out and run it. In order to successfully manage how you're going to run everything with essentially what is your command and control, it takes a lot of trial and error. I am in my 4th year of using the GT now, and I am still learning so many things about it. But the truth is, I have definitely evolved as a user over time. By doing shows and running things a certain way with certain buttons and in certain rows, and how I might have my devices listed with certain MIDI channels and what signals they're sending, every show or every time I've taken it to a rehearsal studio, something changes. I experience something that I didn't like, or maybe I accidentally discovered something that works best for me, so I'll go ahead and revamp it to what works better. The bottom line of me doing this video is to give you a rundown of everything going on in my effect rig, how I'm controlling it with the GT, in order to help you make better decisions on how you can run your rigs to put on a better show and to allow you to think way less on the job. I'll be basing all of my advice and techniques of working with the GT based on years of performing and being on stage or rehearsal studios. Every single project that I've worked on has helped shape how I run things with the GT. So let's go ahead and take a look at my guitar effect rack and see what we're working with here. So from top to bottom, we have Axe FX 3, a Rocktron pedal looper, and then we have a couple of trays of pedals, including the whammy pedal and chaos pad, which are in fact MIDI devices, so we'll treat them as such with this workflow. And then the bottom tray has a Fuzz Factory pedal and the Phase 90. And one other device that you'll find is a wireless MIDI transmitter. However, that's just for my guitar to send MIDI data back from the guitar's MIDI screen to the XY pad on a chaos pad. If you want to know a little more about that, I have a couple of different videos here on my YouTube that you can check out that go very much in depth on how that works. As for the rest of my guitar rig, I also have a full rig video, so if there's more you want to know about how I work that, I definitely recommend checking out that video too. So if we have a look at my pedal board right now, here's the GT22 with the file settings for quiet performances. And what you're looking at here right now is a local page for a song called Fever Dream. Every single song that I have on this file has only one page, but it also includes a local page. If we go to hit page up, we're now looking at page 1. Now each song has this page, and what these are my preferred presets that I use from the chaos pad that I have in my rack. So if I ever want to call anything up on the go, I got it right here. But now if we go back and hit page up, we're back to the local page, and if we go to any other song like There's No Escape, we have the same kind of local page, and the same button settings from page 1 are here as well. Now what we have going on here is that each song has a preset for that dedicated song. So for example, we're in the song set up as There's No Escape, and then the preset that we have over here that's highlighted right now is the preset from Axe FX 3 for the song There's No Escape. And then on the bottom row, we have the scenes for that Axe FX preset that I can select. I recommend that it's best to keep the scenes on the bottom row because it's much easier to access, and in any case, that is what I'll be tapping during a set the most. The first performance that I ever did with this device, I actually had the presets on the bottom row and the scenes in the first full row, and I learned very quickly that that was a terrible decision to make. I don't know why I did that back then, but I knew that during the performance it would not be like that for long. But that's what happens. We evolve. So, anyway, some of the other things we're looking at on this page is, in the center row, we have some instant access buttons for my favorite whammy pedal presets, and the other two are IA buttons for the Phase 90 and the Chaos pad. Pressing these will allow me to engage them in the pedal looper. Now you might be wondering why I have all these buttons set in their own local page for each individual song, when I could actually just have these on a single page like I do with all the Chaos Pad IA buttons. Yes, I could totally do that, and used to work that way. However, the reason why I've gone through the trouble of making a local page for each preset with all these buttons is because of one specific button right up here, Ableton Launch. This is an IA button that allows me to call up an Ableton scene to launch backing tracks for each song that Quiet performs. And it's essential that I have this button on the local page, because what would happen if I put a button like this on a standard page in the GT? Well, the thing is that when you set up a button and you put in some actions, you can only have one specific type of CC code, whether it's for a toggle or momentary. But then if we look at Ableton and we want to MIDI map scenes that we can call up with IA buttons from the GT, we need each play button from the scene to have a different CC code, so there's no way that we can have this button on a standard page. So with that said, I decided to make local pages for each song so that I may use this button on every single song, but give it its own designated CC code for each one. Now, whether or not you're familiar with how it works setting up presets in the GT, especially on the Edit app, you can imagine that it takes a lot of time when you always have to fly in a button, decide what type of button you're going to use, name it, assign the colors, and then finally assigning what actions you need in that button. That is a very time-consuming task, especially if you're in a band that has a lot of songs. Quiet has like 40 plus songs that we can play at any given time. So there's no way that I would ever want to spend hours and hours programming the same kind of local page. So let's go over to the GT Edit app right now, and I'll show you a great time saver tip that you can use to set up your rig too. Okay, so here we are in the GT Edit app. Let's go and dive right in to see what we're working with here. So let's go over to the Buttons tab first, and what we can see right here is my one and only page that I have as a standard page in my settings. We have no other buttons anywhere else. So page 1 just has all the Chaos Pad buttons, but as we saw before, it's really the local pages that do all the work here. So let's go over to presets, and this is where we can find our local page settings. So here's There's No Escape. If you look up here, you'll see that I have the local page checked, and then down over here is the actual local page with all the buttons that we saw out there. If we hit Edit Local Buttons, that gives us the ability to go ahead and add buttons or take away and edit the actual settings or actions within the buttons. So if you were to go back over to the Buttons tab and select one of these on a page, so you see how you can access the settings of a button like that. Well, let's go back to the presets, edit local buttons. You can do that here too. Same deal. It's just that now whatever settings you make for these buttons, they will be on that single local page for that song only, which is precisely what gives me the ability to program a button like Ableton Launch, assign CC number 9 for that Ableton scene. Now if we go up to Fever Dream, check out the local buttons and hit that same Ableton Launch button, we'll see that in action we now have CC code number 2. So there you have it, different songs, different local pages with different buttons. That allows us to select whatever we need in Ableton, which, speaking of, if we had a look at my Ableton session right now, we can see that when we hit the MIDI map, if we look at this sidebar right here and see where Fever Dream and There's No Escape are right down here, we have a little indicator right here of numbers, the 5 and \2 and then 5.9. The 5 is representing what MIDI channel I'm on for the GT, and then 2 and 9 are their respective CC codes, which can also be seen right over here if we look at the sidebar over here with the MIDI map keys. CC number 2 is for scene 47, and CC 9 being 48, which is the exact order these Ableton scenes are in. If you're interested in knowing more about how I run my Ableton scenes with the GT, go ahead and check out the video I released about a few weeks ago. I go very much in depth on the way I run things. So what I'd like to do now is just head over to the global menu and show you some certain settings that I like to keep on. So in my case, since I'm only working with that single page that's a standard page, I'll go ahead and select the field for max button page and keep it at 1, so that way when I go to hit page up, we won't experience any potential trouble of having too many pages within that song. Down in the display settings, I have show only song name checked off. So if you were to have this unchecked, let's say that we were going to go access there's no escape in the GT, what would happen is on the main display screen it'll read there's no escape, but beneath it would say there's no escape again, because that's reflecting which preset that I'm using by Axe-Fx 3. And the same thing can happen with whatever device you're using, maybe if you're using Kemper or a Helix, anything. So you don't need to see the same thing twice, especially when you have the button right there in front of you. So I like to keep that checked on, so that way we're just seeing the song on the display screen. And now another tip that I'd like to go over will be back over in the presets tab. So right here in this field where it says PC messages, this performs a specific task in the GT whenever you go from preset to preset. So let's say for example that I select Fever Dream as a song. What happens is if you look at where Axe-Fx 3 is checked off, it has PC 15 here. That's telling the GT that we wanted to open up that preset from Axe-Fx. However, I have every other device here checked off because we don't need it to pull up anything else. I feel that there's no reason to send any other methods of MIDI communication if we don't need it. So if you're an audio engineer and you're working with an EQ and you want to eliminate frequencies you don't need, same principle here in my opinion. Why make the devices work harder than they need to? And also it reduces the risk of any kind of double data sending, and that can result in some very unfavorable results during the performance. For example, if we have any buttons or devices sending the same PC or CC information at once, that can cause in certain things not loading up correctly for you, or maybe some things will buffer. So by unchecking these things when we don't need them, it guarantees a little more assurance for when you're running your workflow. So the last trick that I'd like to bring up to you is actually something I've gone over in a previous video before, but this is where it's really going to pay off. So like I mentioned earlier when we were looking at my GT22 out there, I was alluding to how when you work with a preset page, especially being a local page with buttons, it can be very, very time consuming to, put in the same different button settings for each preset. So what I did here was, and this was a great tip from Mr. Ron Manelli to do, let's say that we want to go ahead and create a new preset for a new song, have all of these same button settings, including the Ableton launch, but give it a different CC code so it can pull up its own Ableton scene. Here's what we do. Let's say that we want to make preset 51 a new song. We can hit copy from preset. Let's say that we want to use preset 50 for a new song, but we still want to have all those same settings. What we can do is we can right click there and hit copy from preset, and we'll hit number 49 because that preset has the previous number of CC code used in that Ableton launch button. The only work you're going to have to do here is just changing the number of that code up by 1. Okay, that's a lie. Apparently I haven't programmed this one yet, but you get the point. Oh, and of course the only other thing you would have to do here is just rename it. We'll just call this a test. So if you have tons and tons of songs in your catalog and you want to save a lot of time making these presets that have the same kind of settings each time, go ahead and take advantage of this feature. You can copy and paste from every single preset you need and just go down the line, punch in the CC codes you need, and you can call it a day. If you're using Ableton, then what you can do is just go ahead back into your Ableton session, access the MIDI map, and you can just go shooting out buttons one by one, and you can be done within minutes of your live show setup. I'm not even exaggerating, guys. When I first started getting into doing these types of workflows, I had 3 migraines for a few days in a row because I spent hours on end each day looking at this screen and trying to fit so much things in, trial and error, you name it. And it was amazing when I got the job done. It was well worth the trouble, don't get me wrong. But if I had to do it all over again, I wish I had these tricks in the palm of my hands before I did that. So I hope you get a lot out of this demo, believe me. You don't want to suffer that same pain. I don't think I looked at anything to do with the Mastermind for like another week. I was just happy to be playing my instruments for a while. And that's the whole idea. The more that you put yourselves in the position to stay organized with all this stuff, you can have the ability to spend much more time actually playing your instruments than fiddling with your gear. And that is actually my biggest resolution of the new year. So there's just a couple of more things that I'd like to go over with you. So the first thing has something to do with one other thing that's going on in the local pages. So you may notice that for each local page, I have 3 of these green buttons on here, and those are for preset buttons for the Axe FX 3. The first preset to the left is always going to be for the actual song preset, but then the 2 additional presets will be for either a special effect that I want during the song, or perhaps I'd like to have one of my global presets with the Diesel or Fender amp preset so that I can just dabble some riffs between songs here and there. Now the nice thing is that the only presets that will appear on each local page are the ones that you actually have set in the song. When you're accessing the editor with each local preset, it's always going to have these 3 buttons by default. But that doesn't mean that when you're actually physically looking at the GT22 that they'll always be there. So for example, if we were to have a look at a song like Fever Dream, I only have 2 presets in this song, the Crystal Echoes and Fever Dream. So we're only going to have 2 of those green buttons. The third one will be left off and blank. But then if we look at a song like There's No Escape, there's only 1 preset in this song, so hence only 1 green button lit. So in my case, I'm never going to need more than 3 presets within a song. That's how I run things, so it works for me. I decided to leave at least 1 gap of a deactivated button between the presets and the Ableton launch because they do happen to both be the same color, so that's just a good visual cue for me to know that this is not a button that I want to fiddle around with next to the presets. Yeah, I'm sure I could change the color of either one, but when you get the GT out of the box, the preset buttons are green, and the Ableton launch button is a play button, so naturally I will want that to be green. But otherwise, there's really no issues there with doing that. I've never tripped an Ableton switch before, and let's hope that never happens. Well, there's one last tip that I have to give you, and well, you might think that it doesn't even need to be said, but I feel compelled to bring it up. Save your settings files. Save your work, okay? Anything can happen. Your computer might go down, or maybe the GT might require a firmware update. Maybe your buttons will go out of whack right before a show. You never know. And by the way, that's never happened to me before, but the point is that it can. And if you don't have a backup device on hand, you could be in a tough spot if you're about to head into a performance. Aside from assurance of keeping all of your hard work that you've put into a settings file, the truth is that if you're a person like me that is not only a performer in a band, but perhaps you're doing another project, or in my case, I work for other bands sometimes running their in-ear mixes and backing tracks, or using the GT as a DAW controller, within a matter of 60 seconds or less, either of my GT devices can be set up to run an entire workflow for one band or project, which I think is very incredible. For one moment, I could be having the GT10 running a quiet practice. A minute and a half later, I could have it running a show for Farsight, and then another few seconds later I could have it just being a controller for my DAW. It's that simple if we just save our settings files. I like to keep everything organized by just making a folder for all my RJM files right here. So as you can see, these files are just for the setups that I use at home. But as you can see, I have a folder for quiet for our practice situations and live setups. And then I have folders for other bands that I work with and my acoustic gigs. So yeah, if you take the time to actually set up your files for each workflow that you're doing, if you do more than one band, this is an excellent way to use your GT as an all-purpose device for whatever you want to have total access with. Well, this is going to be the end of this video, and not only that, this has been the final installment of a nice long video series that I've done for the Mastermind GT. Part 12, that is it. I had such a great time making all of these videos, and from the smallest detail of going back to the drawing boards and planning how I was going to do everything, what I'd be going over, and how I was going to present everything, I really enjoyed every step of the process. And I want to thank you guys all so much for watching my videos. If you enjoyed this video and the whole series, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you coming back every week. For those of you that are new, please don't hesitate to hit the subscribe button. I will be back very soon doing more videos on gear and releasing some fun stuff. So once more, thank you so much for watching my videos. Stay safe out there, keep working hard, and I'll see you in the next video.